The intergalactic summit gleamed like a colossal starship stranded in the void, hovering above the cerulean plains of Nabarus 9. As Jason stepped out of the Earth delegation pod, his eyes adjusted to the ethereal, shimmering light that bathed the summit grounds, refracting through domes of translucent crystal. The summit, held every solar cycle, was the largest gathering of species in the galaxy, an intricate web of alliances, rivalries, and unspoken feuds played out among towering delegates from every corner of the known universe. Humanity, having recently earned a place among this elite congregation, was still seen as somewhat of an outsider. Jason's strides were steady, his expression calm, yet he could feel the weight of 1,000 alien eyes observing him. He was well aware of his significance here, and that his actions would set a precedent for Earth's future relations. Representing humanity in this summit was both an honor and a daunting responsibility, but Jason was no stranger to high stakes. A former soldier, he had become known for his courage and, more importantly, his unwavering principles, qualities that had drawn both admiration and caution from those in power. The summit's halls were a bewildering maze of towering alien architecture, with ceilings that stretched up into dizzying heights, echoing with the murmurs of foreign tongues and strange music. Jason was aware that somewhere within these halls was King Arctar of the Varric Stellar Empire, a formidable force in the galaxy and a key potential ally for Earth. The Varexian king, known for his strength and cunning, ruled over hundreds of planets, his empire stretching farther than most could fathom. And yet, in a twist of intergalactic politics, this same powerful figure had expressed a keen interest in forging an alliance with humanity. Jason arrived in the Grand Chamber, where the primary delegates gathered, a circular room with a dome that seemed to hold galaxies within its translucent surface. From his position, he observed the array of alien representatives, each displaying cultural markers of their world's golden feathers, glistening scales, skin shifting through vibrant colors, and robes that seemed to be woven from light itself. It was here, amidst the delegates, that Jason spotted King Arctar, seated upon a hovering throne encrusted with gleaming stones that pulsed with the deep blue of distant stars. King Arctar was a towering figure with skin of an obsidian hue and eyes that burned like molten gold. He wore armor crafted from some unknown alloy, reflecting the ambient light like a living mirror. His gaze swept across the room with a commanding presence that hushed even the most brazen voices. Jason felt a chill pass over him as their eyes briefly met. Yet he held his ground, offering a slight nod that conveyed respect without submission. The king's gaze lingered on him for a moment, an appraising flicker passing through his golden eyes, before he turned his attention back to the gathering. The speeches began, long-winded formalities and declarations of allegiance from various representatives. Jason listened attentively, mentally cataloging every promise and threat, every subtle exchange of loyalty and disapproval. He was calculating his approach to the king, considering the precise words that might bridge their cultural gap, when the sudden sound of a scuffle shattered his concentration. Across the hall, amidst the quiet din, Jason noticed a flash of movement too swift, too precise to be accidental. In an instant, his instincts kicked in, and he focused on the scene. A shadow slipped toward the king's throne, and Jason saw the gleam of a hidden blade, poised to strike. Without a second thought, he surged forward, weaving through the throng of diplomats and dignitaries, his footsteps echoing against the polished floor. Time seemed to slow as he closed the distance, adrenaline sharpening his senses, until he could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The assassin's blade descended, aimed directly at the king's unguarded side. With a fierce shout, Jason lunged, intercepting the strike with his forearm, feeling the blade's edge bite through his sleeve. Ignoring the pain, he twisted, wrenching the weapon from the attacker's grip and landing a swift blow to the assailant's temple, rendering him unconscious. The hall fell silent, every eye on Jason as he stood before the king, breathing heavily, blood trickling from the shallow wound on his arm. King Arctar's eyes narrowed, a mixture of surprise and intrigue crossing his face. Slowly, he rose from his throne, towering over Jason with a presence that was both regal and predatory. The hall remained silent, the tension thick as the king studied Jason with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Human," he said, his voice a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the air. "You have risked your life. For mine." Jason inclined his head respectfully. "I saw someone in need, Your Majesty. I acted as anyone should." A faint smile, almost imperceptible, curved the king's lips. "Perhaps," he said, but there are few who would be so bold in this hall. His voice carried a note of approval, a rare tone that had many of the nearby dignitaries glancing at each other in surprise. To Jason's astonishment, the king raised his arm and placed a heavy, clawed hand on his shoulder. "Today you have shown courage and honor, and I, Arktar, shall not forget this." He looked around at the assembly, his voice ringing with authority. "Let it be known that the Earthling Jason Hale has my respect." Jason felt a surge of pride but kept his expression carefully neutral. He understood the gravity of what had just transpired. In a room where power and status were jealously guarded, the king's acknowledgement of him would ripple across the galaxy. What he did not expect, however, was the king's next move. That night, as Jason returned to his quarters, a Virexian guard appeared, flanked by 2 attendants carrying an intricately decorated box. The box was stunning, made of black metal and adorned with shimmering silver vines and precious gems that caught the ambient light. The guard, a towering figure with a disciplined stance, gave Jason a brief, formal nod. "The king of the Varix Empire sends you a gift. In accordance with the ancient customs of our people," the guard intoned, his voice cold and steady. "A token of his gratitude and respect." Jason frowned, puzzled by the ornate box. The Virexian customs were still a mystery to him, but he had heard of the Empire's reputation for valuing tradition and ritual. Nevertheless, he accepted the box with a polite nod, watching as the guard and attendants withdrew silently into the shadows. Left alone, Jason set the box on the table in his quarters, studying its intricate carvings and symbols. He traced his fingers over the cold, smooth metal, noting that the decoration seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. His curiosity piqued, he unlatched the box with a soft click, lifting the lid. Inside, curled into a small space padded with soft, iridescent fabric, was a figure that left him speechless. A young alien girl, delicate and beautiful beyond anything he'd seen, lay within the box. Her skin was a breathtaking shade of metallic blue, like the shimmer of distant stars, her eyes large and hauntingly luminous, framed by long, dark lashes. Her hair, a silken silver, cascaded over her shoulders like a river of moonlight. She was dressed in intricate robes, the fabric whispering of silks and metals unknown to Earth, and a faint, floral scent wafted from her, strange yet intoxicating. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open to reveal depths that held both fear and resigned acceptance. As her gaze met his, Jason's shock gave way to a sharp pang of realization. This wasn't just a gift, it was a living being. The gravity of the king's token of gratitude sank in, filling him with a sickening awareness of the cultural chasm between humanity and the Virexian Empire. She rose slightly, bowing her head in a way that spoke of training conditioning. Every movement was subdued, deferential, almost robotic. She was waiting for instructions, her gaze lowered as though expecting nothing but orders. Jason's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Do you understand me?" She lifted her gaze, a flicker of confusion crossing her face before she nodded, the motion so slight it was almost imperceptible. There was something in her eyes, an echo of someone who had known nothing but obedience, someone who had been shaped, molded to another's will. He felt a wave of pity mingled with anger, directed at the culture that had placed her in this position. You're free to leave," he stammered, though he knew the words would be meaningless to her. Freedom was not something she could even comprehend, let alone act upon. The girl remained silent, her eyes soft yet distant, as though she'd heard him but hadn't truly understood. Jason knew, at that moment, that this gift was more than a symbol. It was a test, a challenge from the king that he had not anticipated, and as he looked into the girl's haunting eyes, he felt a responsibility begin to weigh upon him. In the vast halls of the galaxy, where cultures clashed in power was a currency, Jason realized he'd been given something he could neither return nor ignore. In that moment, he vowed that he would do more than simply accept her presence. He would give her something she had never known: freedom, if he could help her grasp it. The morning light streamed softly through the crystal-paneled windows of Jason's quarters, casting fractured rainbows across the walls. Jason sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped together, deep in thought. A soft rustle from the far side of the room reminded him that he was not alone. His gaze shifted to the delicate figure seated on the floor, motionless and silent, her metallic blue skin shimmering faintly in the light. The alien girl, the gift from King Arktar, sat with her head bowed, hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't spoken a word since the previous night, not that he expected her to. Her silence was not one of defiance or shyness, but rather the silence of someone who had never been granted the opportunity, the permission, to speak on her own terms. Her large, luminous eyes seemed to absorb every detail around her, yet she remained passive, as if waiting for him to decide her next move, her next breath. Jason felt a pang of discomfort as he studied her. In the Earth culture he had been raised in, the idea of slavery was abhorrent, a relic of a dark past long buried. But here, across light years and worlds unknown, he was confronted by the reality that, in some cultures, the concept persisted in ways he could scarcely fathom. The customs and values of the Virexian Empire, grand and ancient, were an enigma to him. And now, thanks to his bravery in saving the king's life, he had inherited a piece of that empire, one he did not want but could not deny. Clearing his throat, he spoke, keeping his voice gentle, though he knew his words might not reach her as he intended. "You don't need to sit on the floor." Here he motioned to the chair nearby, a small but significant gesture, hoping it might convey the idea that she wasn't beneath him. "You're welcome to sit wherever you like." She blinked, her gaze flickering up to his, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw a glimmer of something curiosity, maybe? But her expression remained as composed and unreadable as ever. Her fingers twitched slightly, but she didn't move from her spot. Jason sighed inwardly. It was as though she'd been carved from marble, every instinct, every movement regulated and controlled by unseen chains. "I'm Jason," he said, softer this time, as if he were coaxing a wild creature. "Jason Hale. Do you have a name?" The girl tilted her head, a small, bird-like movement. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were testing the sound in her mind before daring to release it into the air. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper, thin, hesitant, and laced with an accent that made her words sound almost melodic. "Sira," she murmured. "Sira," he repeated, smiling in spite of himself. The name suited her, flowing like the wind over some distant alien desert. "It's nice to meet you, Sira." The girl, Sira, gave a faint nod, acknowledging his greeting but remaining guarded, as if expecting punishment for something as bold as making eye contact. Jason's chest tightened with frustration. How could anyone have such power over another that they erased even the concept of self from a person? He decided to change his approach, moving to sit across from her at eye level. "Listen, Sira," he began, choosing his words with care. "I know you're here because the king wanted to honor me, but I don't. I don't believe in keeping someone as a gift. Where I come from, people are free to live as they choose. No one owns anyone else." Sira's expression didn't change. She blinked slowly, processing his words, and there was a flicker of confusion in her wide, starry eyes. "But I belong to you now," she whispered, the words falling from her lips with a practiced certainty, as if reciting a lesson. "That is what I am. I was born for it, trained for it." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. There was no resistance, no defiance in her tone. She said it with the same inevitability that one might state the color of the sky. She believed it every word. "But you don't belong to me," Jason said firmly, leaning closer, hoping his conviction might cut through the chains binding her mind. "No one belongs to anyone. You can make your own choices, Sira. If there's something you want, or don't want, you have the right to decide for yourself." She tilted her head slightly, as if he were speaking an alien language. Her brow creased ever so faintly, an expression of puzzlement, though she still remained obediently still. Choices she repeated slowly, as if testing the word on her tongue. "I don't know what you mean." Jason took a deep breath. How could he possibly explain the concept of freedom to someone who had never known anything else but servitude? Every instinct she possessed, every thought, had been molded to serve another. He realized then that simply offering her freedom was akin to offering a fish wings. He needed to guide her, one step at a time, away from the only existence she'd ever known. "All right," he said, thinking quickly. "Let's try something different. Would you like to go outside? To see the summit gardens?" Sira's gaze drifted past him, toward the door, but her body language betrayed no longing, no glimmer of interest. She simply nodded, a conditioned response to an order, rather than a genuine expression of desire. Jason suppressed his sigh of frustration, offering her a hand. She looked at it for a moment, eyes wide and uncertain, before delicately placing her small, cool hand in his. Together, they walked through the winding halls of the summit compound, her steps light and noiseless beside his. Jason could feel the curious stares of other delegates in attendance as they passed, their eyes flicking from him to Sira, a rare spectacle in a galaxy of rare spectacles. Outside, the summit gardens stretched in a vast expanse of color and life. Alien flora, vibrant and strange, covered the grounds, some plants pulsing with an inner glow, others shifting colors with the light. The air was filled with an array of scents, both sweet and sharp, mingling to form a fragrance both foreign and exhilarating. Jason inhaled deeply, hoping the sight of nature, alien as it might be, might stir something in her. But Sira only gazed around, expressionless, her eyes as blank and unreadable as before. Jason led her to a shimmering pool surrounded by softly humming plants that released tiny spores, which drifted lazily in the breeze like living sparks. He crouched down, gesturing to the water, where small, luminescent creatures darted beneath the surface. "Do you see them, Sira?" he asked, pointing to the creatures. "They're free to move wherever they want in that pool. They aren't owned by anyone. No one decides where they should go or what they should do." Sira crouched beside him, her eyes following the movement of the creatures with mild curiosity. "But they cannot leave the water," she murmured, her voice laced with a quiet acceptance. "They are free, but only within their bounds." Her words startled him. He hadn't considered it that way. "Yes," he replied slowly, "but within that pool they make their own choices. They choose to swim left or right, fast or slow. It may be small, but it's freedom." Sira was silent for a long moment, her gaze transfixed on the pool. Jason could almost see her mind working, the slow process of deconstructing the only truth she'd ever known. Yet her brow furrowed, and she shook her head faintly, as though unable to reconcile his words with her reality. She looked at him, a question flickering in her eyes. "If you do not want me as yours," she hesitated, the words sounding foreign, "then what am I supposed to be?" Jason paused, realizing that his words, however well-meaning, had perhaps created more confusion than clarity. He had told her she was free, but he hadn't given her the tools to understand what that meant. In her world, identity was defined by one's owner, by one's purpose to serve. Without that, she was left in a void, unable to define herself. "Who you are," Jason said gently, "is something you'll discover for yourself. It might be scary at first, but you'll find things you like, things you dislike. It takes time, but that's what makes it real." She absorbed his words, her gaze drifting back to the pool, as if seeking answers in its depths. Jason watched her, a mixture of hope and sadness in his chest. This journey they were on together was fragile and fraught with misunderstanding. But in her eyes he saw the faintest spark of something new, curiosity, perhaps, or a burgeoning awareness. Just as he was about to stand, she reached out, almost hesitantly, and touched the water's surface. Ripples spread across the pool, distorting the light and sending the creatures darting away. Her lips parted slightly in what he thought might be surprise, though she quickly masked it, as if unaccustomed to feeling, let alone showing, emotion. The moment was small, but it felt monumental, a tiny fracture in the wall built around her mind. They sat in silence as she stared at the water, lost in thought. The garden around them buzzed with alien life, a gentle symphony of existence that seemed to acknowledge her quiet presence. Jason knew they still had far to go. But as he looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, he allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her see herself not as a possession but as a person. And that, he knew, would be the first step toward real freedom for both of them. The journey back to Earth was quiet, the ship a silent traveler slipping through the vast fabric of space. Jason had always found these trips across the stars humbling, a reminder of how small even the grandest ambitions were in the face of the universe's vast, unyielding darkness. Now, however, he was far from alone, and his thoughts were occupied not with the stars but with the silent figure sitting across the cabin, watching the constellations slip by in the dark glass viewport. Sira had remained mostly quiet since they'd boarded the ship. The silence she carried was not the uncomfortable type Jason was used to, intense diplomatic negotiations or the brooding silence of soldiers before a battle. Sira's silence was her nature, as ingrained as her delicate, metallic blue skin and her large, dark eyes that gleamed with a haunting kind of curiosity. The journey felt as though it were taking place in a fragile, shared cocoon, one where they hovered between two worlds, between two states of understanding, and Jason knew that both he and Sira were beginning a process neither fully understood. The cabin lights were dimmed, leaving a soft, gentle glow that gave the space a sense of tranquility. Jason took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his thoughts. If he wanted Sira to understand freedom, he'd have to be patient, guiding her not with words alone, but by showing her what choice looked like little by little, one small experience at a time. He stood up and gestured for her to join him by the viewport, where the stars gleamed coldly against the darkness. "These stars," Jason began, gesturing to the speckled expanse, "do you know much about them?" She shook her head slightly, her expression revealing both curiosity and trepidation, as if unsure whether the question was a test. Her gaze remained transfixed on the stars, and he wondered if she'd ever really looked at them before, truly seen them. "In many ways, the stars are like us," Jason said, his voice low and thoughtful. "They're spread across vast distances, each one unique, with its own identity, its own story. But they share the same space. They're connected, in a way yet free." Sira turned to him, her eyes catching the faint starlight, giving them an almost hypnotic glow. "They are free," she murmured, her voice a whisper. "But they are bound in the sky, fixed in their places." Jason considered her words. For someone conditioned to see the universe as a rigid structure, where every being had a predefined role, the idea of freedom without boundaries was likely incomprehensible. "They're fixed," yes, he replied, "but each star burns on its own terms. No one commands them. They create their own light, their own path through time. They exist, for themselves." Sira absorbed this in silence, her gaze drifting back to the stars. Jason didn't press her for more questions, knowing that she needed time to process, to allow these ideas to settle like seeds in fertile soil. The silence between them now felt warmer, less fragile, as if the understanding between them, though delicate, was beginning to grow roots. As the ship hummed quietly through the depths, Jason decided it was time for a different kind of experience. He led Sira to the galley, a modest kitchen area stocked with essentials for long journeys. He opened one of the storage units, revealing an array of preserved foods, fruits, and drink packets. Selecting 2 brightly colored fruits, he set them on the small table in front of Sira, whose wide eyes flicked from him to the fruit, a faint line of confusion creasing her brow. "These are fruits from my home," Jason said, picking up one of the fruits, a soft, dark red orb with a smooth, glossy surface. "They're called persimmons. Have you ever tasted one?" She shook her head, her expression uncertain. Jason suppressed a smile, realizing he was witnessing something that should have been universal, a simple, curious exploration of the senses. But to Sira, such explorations were foreign, something she'd never been granted. Taking a knife, he carefully sliced the fruit in half, revealing the rich, juicy interior. He offered her one half, watching her reaction. Tentatively, Sira lifted the fruit, her fingers delicate as she brought it to her lips. She took a small bite, her eyes widening slightly as the sweetness burst across her tongue. Jason could see the faintest hint of surprise in her expression, a tiny spark that hinted at delight. She glanced at him, as if seeking reassurance, and he nodded, grinning. "It's sweet," she murmured softly, staring at the fruit, as though it held a secret she had never considered. She took another small bite, her movements hesitant but growing in confidence. Jason couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. To him, it was just a persimmon, a taste he'd known all his life. But to Sira, this was a new sensation, one she'd chosen to engage with on her own terms, however small the choice may have been. For the rest of the journey, he continued introducing her to small experiences, offering her a taste of Earth's culture in ways that weren't imposing but rather invitational. He played her music from Earth, a simple tune on a guitar, followed by a few classical compositions that filled the ship's small living quarters with a haunting beauty. She listened intently, her eyes closed, her face serene, as if she were allowing herself to be transported somewhere beyond the confines of the cabin. Then, one evening, as they were passing through the orbit of an uninhabited planet known for its breathtaking gas rings, Jason showed her how to use the ship's observatory, a glass dome nestled at the ship's top, offering a 360-degree view of the stars and planets beyond. As they entered, Sira's breath caught, her eyes widening in awe as the full majesty of the universe unfolded around them. Her hand reached out instinctively, pressing against the glass, as though she wanted to touch the distant rings and stars. Jason stood by her side, watching her expression, feeling a deep, inexplicable sense of pride. "This is freedom, Sira," he murmured softly. "The freedom to see, to feel, to experience the world without anyone telling you what to think or feel about it." Sira turned to him, her expression vulnerable. "But what if? What if I do not know what I feel? What if I am not capable of choosing?" Jason reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, It's okay if you don't know. Discovering what you feel, who you are, it takes time. Freedom isn't about knowing everything. It's about being able to ask questions, to make mistakes, to learn for yourself. Her gaze remained fixed on him, her brow furrowing as she considered his words. For a long moment they stood in silence, the stars shining around them, their light forming a radiant web across the vast dome. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. In the Varix Empire, she whispered, we are taught that we are parts of a whole, that our existence is only meaningful when it serves the purpose given to us. She hesitated, her voice faltering slightly. I never questioned it. I thought it was all there was. Jason's heart twisted as he listened, struck by the weight of her words. The conditioning, the expectations, they had been all she'd known. His respect for her grew as he realized the courage it took for her to question the very foundation of her existence. But now you can question it, he said gently. You can wonder, dream, explore. There's no one here to tell you otherwise. For the first time since they'd met, Syrah's face softened, her gaze warming as if she'd caught the first glimpse of something precious. Then, I think I want to see more, she said, her voice trembling with an unfamiliar resolve. I want to understand. I want to learn about the stars, the worlds, and myself. Jason's smile broadened, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and joy. Then we'll do that, Syrah, he promised. Together we'll explore everything. The rest of the journey passed in a quiet rhythm, marked by shared moments and growing trust. Syrah began to ask questions, first tentatively, then with growing confidence. She asked about the Earth, about human culture, about his life and family. Each question opened a door, revealing a glimpse of a mind awakening from a long sleep. Jason answered patiently, encouraging her curiosity, even when the questions were difficult or painful, sensing that each answer mattered deeply to her journey of self-discovery. When Earth finally loomed outside the viewport, a sphere of blue and green amidst the dark, Syrah stood beside Jason, her face filled with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Her fingers gripped the edge of the viewport as she stared at the planet that had shaped Jason, the world that would soon shape her as well. As they began their descent, Jason spoke quietly, his tone soft but firm. Earth is very different from the Varix Empire, Syrah. Some people will welcome you, and others might not understand. But remember, you're free now. You can choose what you want, who you want to be. Syrah's gaze remained fixed on the planet, her expression unreadable. I am still afraid, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I do not know how to be free. Jason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his expression gentle. It's okay to be afraid. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means choosing to face it, to keep going even when you don't know what's ahead. I'll be here with you. You're not alone in this. They landed on Earth just as the first light of dawn crested over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the landscape. Jason's heart thudded as he stepped out of the ship, Syrah by his side, her expression both awestruck and fearful as she took in the strange beauty of Earth. As they walked through the early morning mist, Jason glanced at her, feeling a swell of protectiveness. Syrah had stepped out of the only world she'd ever known, embarking on a journey that would change her forever. And as he led her into the unknown, he knew that his life, too, would never be the same. The dawn light streamed through the wide windows of Jason's apartment, casting soft golden hues across the floor. Earth's quiet mornings were a new experience for Syrah, who had grown used to the endless hum of Varexian halls and starships. Here the silence was filled with gentle sounds, the hum of wind against the glass, the distant chatter of people passing on the street below, and the soft rustle of leaves in the courtyard outside. For the first time she felt a sense of calm that was unfamiliar but welcomed. She stood by the window, gazing out over the cityscape with a faint smile, her eyes tracing the patterns of life below. Since their arrival, Jason had introduced her to the rhythms of Earth, taking her through parks and crowded streets, to small cafes, and even to the shore where the ocean met the sky in an endless embrace. These moments, though simple, had carved away at the edges of her fear, letting in fragments of peace she had never believed possible. Jason watched her from across the room, a warmth growing in his chest as he observed her transformation. She was no longer the timid, silent figure trapped in her own conditioning. Slowly but surely, Syrah was emerging from the shadows of her past, becoming someone entirely new, someone radiant, curious, and even a little playful. Her laughter, though quiet, had become one of his favorite sounds, and the way her eyes softened when she looked at him made him feel as if he were glimpsing the universe through her gaze. On this particular morning, Jason was preparing breakfast, humming a tune as he sliced fresh fruit. He looked up, catching her eye as she turned from the window, her expression softened by a quiet sense of contentment. She came to sit across from him at the small dining table, reaching out tentatively for a piece of fruit he offered, her fingers brushing his. The touch was brief but electric, leaving a warmth that lingered longer than it should have. They ate in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Syrah's questions about the food, about the way Jason prepared it, and about his life growing up on Earth. Her curiosity seemed endless, and Jason answered each question with patience, savoring every moment of their conversation. As they finished, a notification blinked on Jason's communication screen, and his face grew serious as he read the message. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair, then turned to Syrah. "The Variks Empire has heard about the changes," he said, choosing his words carefully. "They're not pleased. The king feels that my decision to let you live freely is a rejection of his gift. They're putting pressure on Earth's leaders to return you." A flicker of fear crossed Syrah's face, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on her hands resting on the table. "I won't let that happen," Jason added quickly, reaching across the table to take her hands in his. "I promised you freedom, Syrah, and I meant it. I'd give up everything before I'd let them take you back." She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of hope and sorrow. "But your position, your people, would they not turn against you for my sake?" Jason shook his head, his grip on her hands tightening slightly. "I'll find a way. I don't know how yet, but I'll protect you. I can't stand the thought of losing you, Syrah. Not now, not when he paused, struggling to find the words. "When I care about you as much as I do." The room grew quiet, and Syrah's cheeks flushed, a delicate shade that heightened the metallic sheen of her skin. Her eyes were wide, searching his face for something she could scarcely believe. Her lips parted slightly as she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Jason, I never thought I would feel this way. For so long I believed that I was only what they told me to be, that I was nothing without them. But with you, I've started to see myself as something more." She hesitated, her gaze dropping. "You've shown me kindness, patience, love. I feel it too." Jason's heart raced, her words wrapping around him like a warm embrace. He reached up, cupping her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheek in a slow, tender motion. She leaned into his touch, her eyes half closed, her breath shallow and uneven. The space between them felt charged, the unspoken emotions, the hesitant promises, all blending together in a profound, shared silence. Their faces were so close now, and Jason could feel her breath on his lips, the warmth radiating from her skin. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration, then closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both soft and intense. Syrah's response was tentative at first, as if testing this new intimacy, but her movements soon grew more confident, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, pulling him closer. They lingered in that kiss, savoring every second, as if the world beyond them had ceased to exist. In that moment they were free, two souls unbound by expectation, by duty, or by the constraints of their worlds. It was just them, lost in each other, and it felt like they had waited lifetimes for this one perfect moment. When they finally pulled back, breathless and dazed, Jason rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his mind overwhelmed with emotions he could barely comprehend. He wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. It was a rhythm that matched his own, as if they had always been meant to find each other across the vast stretches of the galaxy. Syrah looked up at him, her gaze filled with wonder, and something deeper, a new understanding that went beyond words. She pressed her lips to his again, this time with more certainty, more passion. They kissed deeply, their breaths mingling as their hands explored each other's faces, their arms wrapped around each other as though they feared to let go. Slowly, tenderly, Jason guided her to the bed, his touches gentle and reverent. Their love unfolded in a quiet intimacy, a shared vulnerability as they discovered each other, their barriers falling away. Syrah's skin was warm beneath his fingertips, her breath soft against his ear, and every touch, every kiss, was filled with a profound tenderness. They moved together in harmony, their bodies and hearts entwined in a dance that transcended words. For Syrah, it was an experience that went beyond the physical. It was a declaration, a shedding of the chains that had once defined her existence. With Jason, she felt seen, valued, cherished in a way she had never believed possible. And for Jacen it was a moment of surrender, of giving himself fully to someone who had reshaped his understanding of loyalty, love, and freedom. Afterward, they lay together, entwined in each other's arms, their breathing soft and synchronized. Jacen ran his fingers gently through her silver hair, marveling at the softness of it, the way it shimmered like moonlight against the dark sheets. Sira rested her head against his chest, her eyes closed, her hand resting over his heart, as if anchoring herself to the rhythm of his life. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the window, Jacen kissed her forehead, whispering, "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." Sira looked up at him, her eyes soft and filled with a fierce loyalty that spoke of her own vow, silent but strong. She cupped his face, her thumb tracing his jaw, and nodded. Together she whispered. They knew the challenges that lay ahead. The Variks Empire would not easily forgive what they would see as a betrayal, and Earth's leaders were wary, hesitant to risk their fragile alliance for the sake of one alien girl. But none of that mattered in this moment. They had found something beyond duty and destiny, a bond forged in mutual respect and love, a bond that transcended worlds and cultures. As they held each other in the quiet morning, Jacen knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. They had chosen each other, not out of obligation but out of love, and in that choice they had found a freedom neither had ever believed possible. The days following that quiet dawn were filled with a new kind of intimacy, one where every glance, every touch, carried the unspoken promise of a love that had been forged through trials and quiet moments of understanding. In those fleeting hours, Jacen and Sira lived in a world all their own, savoring the simplicity of shared meals, the gentle laughter that flowed between them, and the precious private moments where words were unnecessary. Yet outside the sanctuary of Jacen's apartment, pressures from the intergalactic world were building, bearing down with the weight of empires and alliances. The Variks Empire, angered by what they deemed a blatant rejection of tradition and honor, had tightened their demands. King Arctar, the same ruler who had bestowed Sira upon Jacen as a mark of favor, now viewed Jacen's treatment of his gift as an insult. To the Variks, Jacen's choice to give Sira her freedom had become a breach of both respect and alliance, and the repercussions were beginning to reach Earth's political sphere. Jacen had been summoned to multiple meetings with Earth's leaders, each one increasingly tense as they urged him to reconsider, to give Sira back to the Empire in exchange for peace. They reminded him of Earth's precarious position within the galactic community, a young planet on the edge of acceptance, a world that couldn't afford to make enemies among powerful empires. Yet each time Jacen had stood his ground, his resolve unshaken. "She is not an object to be returned," he had argued, his voice steady, his heart resolute. "She is a person with her own life, her own choices. If our place in this galaxy depends on denying someone's freedom, then perhaps we don't deserve that place at all." Despite the pressure, Jacen's conviction only grew stronger, and with each argument, each challenge, he found himself looking forward to the haven he had created with Sira. She had become his anchor, his reminder of the principles he had sworn to uphold, and he could feel her trust and support strengthening his resolve. The stakes were high, but with her by his side, he felt capable of facing any threat, any consequence. One evening, as twilight descended over the city, painting the skyline in shades of violet and amber, Jacen took Sira out to a small garden hidden in the heart of the bustling metropolis. It was a place he had discovered as a boy, a sanctuary from the world where wildflowers bloomed freely, untouched by the concrete and steel of the city. He led her along the winding path, his fingers entwined with hers, his heart thudding with anticipation. Sira's gaze was filled with wonder as she looked around, her eyes tracing the delicate petals and lush greenery. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of jasmine and fresh earth, and Jacen watched her, a faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. She seemed to glow in the fading light, her silver hair shimmering like threads of starlight, her face softened by a quiet contentment that made his heart swell. They reached a secluded corner of the garden, where a single tree stood, its branches heavy with blossoms that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Jacen turned to her, his hand still clasped in hers, and took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. "Sira," he began, his voice steady but soft. "When I first received you as a gift, I felt lost, unsure of what I could do for you, how I could help you understand freedom." But now he hesitated, a smile breaking through his seriousness. "Now I think it was you who helped me understand what freedom really means. You taught me that love and freedom are not just choices but responsibilities, and I want nothing more than to carry that responsibility with you." Syrah's eyes widened, her breath catching as she listened, her fingers tightening around his. Her expression was a mixture of surprise and hope, and Jason could see her struggling to contain the emotions welling up within her. Jason knelt down, his gaze unwavering as he looked up at her, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and vulnerability. From his pocket, he pulled a small ring, a simple band of silver that gleamed softly in the dim light. It was not adorned with jewels or intricate designs. Instead, it held a quiet elegance, a reflection of the love they had built steady, strong, and unbreakable. "Syrah," he continued, his voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me? Will you stand by my side, not as a gift or a responsibility, but as my partner, my equal, my love?" For a moment Syrah was silent, her eyes glistening as she stared at him, her hands pressed to her lips. She knelt down to meet him, her hands trembling as she reached out to cradle his face, her thumbs tracing his cheekbones as though memorizing every line of his expression. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Jason, I would stand by your side in this life and any other. I have loved you from the moment you showed me the meaning of kindness, of choice, of being someone beyond what I was told to be. I never imagined that I could love so deeply." She let out a soft, joyful laugh, her face radiant. "Yes, I will marry you." Jason felt a surge of relief and joy unlike anything he had ever known. He slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling the weight of the moment, the gravity of a vow shared under the open sky. As they kissed, their embrace sealed by the quiet promises spoken in whispers, he felt that the world around them had faded, leaving only them, bound not by duty or tradition, but by a love that had been tested, shaped, and made stronger. Yet their joy was not meant to remain untouched. The following morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise, they were awakened by the insistent beep of Jason's communicator. The message was direct, and cold Varexian enforcers are on their way to Earth. Prepare for diplomatic negotiations, or face the consequences. Jason felt a chill settle over him as he read the words. The Empire was escalating matters, determined to retrieve what they saw as their property. He looked at Syrah, who was watching him with calm, steady eyes, her expression unreadable. But he knew her well enough to sense her fear, her uncertainty beneath the surface. "They're coming for me," she murmured, her voice a whisper, filled with a quiet acceptance that made his heart ache. "No," Jason replied firmly, reaching out to take her hand. "They're coming for a person who no longer exists. You are Syrah, my fiancée, my love, and I will protect you with everything I have." He paused, his gaze fierce. "We'll go to a neutral territory. There's a planet on the edge of Varexian space where they can't touch us without risking political fallout." They left Earth before dawn, slipping away quietly, their departure known only to a select few who understood the stakes. As they traveled, Jason held Syrah close, offering her what comfort he could, knowing that the journey ahead would test them both. They arrived on the neutral planet of Meridel, a world of emerald jungles and crystal-clear lakes, a place known for its beauty and diplomatic neutrality. Here, they hoped to find a refuge, a place to live in peace, to build the life they had promised each other. Yet they knew the Varexian Empire would not give up easily. Days turned into weeks as they adjusted to their new home, their love growing stronger with each challenge, each quiet evening spent beneath the stars. But the threat of the Empire lingered, casting a shadow over their sanctuary. One evening, as they walked along the shores of a lake, Jason spoke with a heaviness in his voice. "They may never stop, Syrah. King Arctar has staked his pride on reclaiming you. He sees my defiance as a challenge to his rule, his authority. As long as he believes you are his, I fear he won't relent." Syrah turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "Then let him come," she said softly. "I am no longer his, and I will never be anyone's possession again. Let them see what freedom has made me, what love has given me." The following day, a Varexian delegation arrived on Meridel, led by a high-ranking ambassador who bore the king's personal insignia. Jason and Syrah met them, standing side by side, their hands intertwined, a united front against the Empire's might. The ambassador's gaze lingered on Syrah, his expression hardening as he spoke. "The king demands the return of what is rightfully his." Jason stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "Syrah belongs to no one. She is my partner, my wife-to-be, and under the laws of Meridel, she has the right to remain free." The ambassador's eyes narrowed, his voice laced with disdain. You would risk the wrath of the Empire over this. Sentiment. Jacen met his gaze, unwavering. This is not sentiment, this is love, and I will defend it, no matter the cost. Syrah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Tell the king that the First am not a gift, not a possession. I am Syrah, and I choose my own life, my own future. If he cannot accept that, then he can live with the consequences of his own pride. The ambassador, clearly discomfited by her defiance, withdrew without another word, his expression dark as he returned to his ship. Jacen and Syrah watched as the delegation left, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. In the quiet that followed, they looked at each other, realizing the enormity of what they had just done. By standing against the Empire, they had sealed their fates together, bound by a choice that had been made freely, defiantly, and with love. Jacen took her hands, his voice soft but filled with conviction. Whatever comes, we face it together. Syrah smiled, her gaze unwavering as she looked at him, her voice a quiet promise. Together, always. And so, as the stars rose over Mirrodel, casting their light upon the lake and the couple standing hand in hand, they knew that they had chosen a future of their own, making a future bound by love, by freedom, and by the unbreakable bond they had forged across worlds.